turn around, look at what you see in her face, the mirror of your dreams. Standing in your underwear, cottony and white, no matter what your age is, crawling up your crack a never-ending question.
Welcome to the Escape Podcast, your source for all good things in the universe of movies. I'm Brandon.
And I'm David. Join us as we explore the vast reaches of science fiction, fantasy, action-adventure, and beyond.
And I'm Josh. Today is episode 21, and we'll be talking about the Neverending Story from 1984.
We'll start off with a little bit of what's going on in the world of movies. I think Dave and I just saw Guardians of the Galaxy 2.
Yes.
Tell us about Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Dave.
I gotta say that this has seriously grown on me since I saw the first one. I was completely uninterested in it in the first one, and every time I watched the first one, I liked it more and more. And so by the time it came out on Blu-ray, I gotta own it. So I bought it on Blu-ray, and it's actually my wife's favorite of all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. This is like her favorite. So it's like anytime she wants to watch a comic book movie, she picks Guardians. And so I really like it.
Reason why?
I really don't know, other than the fact that there's so much really good music for my wife. That's like a big plus. It's the music aspect of the movie. And, I really enjoy that classic music as well. Like, she owns the soundtrack, and she's probably going to get the new movie soundtrack too at some point. But, yeah, it's just been kind of this thing that grew on both my wife and I, and we really like it. And I've really enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the sequel a lot. I thought it was just as good as the first one. I don't know if I could say it was better or worse. I thought it was, in the exact same vein of quality and effects, and everything was just right where it should be. And I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too. I think I do like it better than the first one. I've talked to some people about it, and it's gone back and forth on whether they liked it better than the first one or not. I did. I felt like it kind of broke. There's a certain type of story that Marvel likes to tell, especially with like the first installment of a franchise. So like, the first Iron Man and the first Doctor Strange, you can compare those to the way this story plays out. This one felt like it kind of broke the mold a little bit. I knew all of the characters that were going to be in the movie, or most of them anyway. And, I wasn't exactly sure how it was going to play out, like who the villain was going to be, or the big bad, I guess. And that kind of caught me off guard, who the villain was and how that all worked out. I had heard that the theme of the movie was going to be family, and I knew that going in, and they really kind of pushed that into your face. It wasn't very a little bit. Yeah, it wasn't super subtle, but it was good. I enjoyed it. Everybody seemed to get like their piece of the story. Peter Quill is the main one, but it's still like a movie about the group as a whole. And and this one they had a few new additions to the team, and they were cool. I liked the Mantis character. She's unique because you expect everybody to come in with like these crazy powers and to kick butt. Well, not everybody's power lets them kick butt. Some people have some more unique abilities that allow them to do other things. So that was cool. I noticed that the color in the movie was nice. There's a lot of it's just a very colorful movie. It looked really nice. The special effects were good. The comedy was there, and it had a tone where it could go from making you laugh one second to almost making you cry the other second. And that tone worked. It wasn't like Amazing Spider-Man 2 where it was all over the place. Like, it flowed very nicely. And I think that's because James Gunn was the director and the writer for this one. So like everything was kind of pretty much just going through him. So when it all channeled through one person, it wasn't being pulled in all sorts of different directions.
Right.
And there's some cameos that I can't really mention. There was more than one, and one of them could mean big news for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, or it could just be a joke. But that's for another discussion.
I'm gonna talk about one cameo because of the fact that this cameo was also a cameo from the first Guardians movie, and
Okay.
that is of course Howard the Duck.
Yes, that was one of them.
I know nothing about this character, but he was obviously in that post-credits scene for the first movie, and I did not expect him to show up again, ever again. And it's such a silly character on the surface. Beyond what I don't know anything about the character, like I said, but I'm really kind of afraid what his presence in the Marvel movies could mean.
I know a little bit about his character from the
watch
comics, but most of what I remember about Howard the Duck is that they made that it was an official Marvel movie of Howard the Duck in the 80s, and it scared the crap out of me when I was a kid.
So I've seen that movie.
Yeah, that may be a movie that we end up covering later on the podcast.
I've seen that movie as a kid when it came on TV.
Yeah, do you have any horrible memories of it?
I mean, I knew it. I didn't have a problem with it as a kid because I
was terrified of it.
But because of the scorpions?
Probably.
Okay.
Scorpions.
There's like some kind of monster that's
scorpion monsters, yeah.
And yeah, those things always scared the crap out of me. And didn't somebody kind of like turn into a monster too?
That I don't recall offhand.
Well, we'll find out when we watch it, I guess.
I think Tim Robbins is in it, and Leah Thompson is also in it.
Yeah, I know Leah Thompson's in it.
Yeah, you're right.
So, Dave, would you have like a score, just a real quick score for Guardians of the Galaxy, or a grade?
Well, I mean, yeah, I'd definitely give it an A. I mean, I wouldn't give it an A plus. I mean, I wasn't blown away. I mean, really, the only movies that blow me away are like my favorites, like Captain America or like, you know, Man of Steel, stuff like that. I would give A pluses to, but this is a solid A in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I'd also give it an A, and I'd also like to add, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, this is gonna be out a few weeks after it's been out already. But yeah, if anybody hasn't seen it yet, you know, there's the traditional end credit scene. Well, there's several, so stick around for the whole thing. The credits are kind of enjoyable anyway, so yeah, it shouldn't be too bad.
You know what I was kind of expecting? Maybe I missed it, but since Doctor Strange was the most recent Marvel movie before this one, I was kind of expecting some sort of nod or connection point or something, some kind of mention of some aspect of Doctor Strange in this movie.
That'll be in Thor.
Okay. Well, I know that because from the post-credits scene in Doctor Strange, there's obviously a huge Thor connection there. So I know that he's gonna have that appearance. But yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah, and then next is Spider-Man, which looks interesting. I'm sure I'll see it right away.
Very excited
about that. After that, it's Thor, and then I think after that is maybe Black Panther, and then we finally get into Infinity War.
Yes. Yeah, so. And you know, I thought I read recently that speaking of all these Marvel movies, I thought I read recently that Chris Evans is actually contractually up with playing Captain America. Is he no longer doing that now after the final Avengers Infinity War movie?
I had heard stuff about that a while ago, and then I had also heard that any of them that were kind of like looking forward to getting out, their relationship with Marvel and Disney has been improved. So I'm not sure where everybody stands right now. I'd have to like do a little more research on that.
I see. Yeah, because I heard that in an interview, and I saw like a headline that said Chris Evans says, you know, nothing lasts forever, and I'm like, oh geez, I guess that means he's done with the role. But that would be really depressing for me because Captain America is actually my favorite Avengers character.
I hear that Hugh Jackman is looking for a job. So who knows?
Yeah, he could play Cap. Old man Steven.
Is there anything you wanted to bring up, Josh?
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Wait. What are we talking about? Captain or about Guardians?
Movie news or anything? Are you gonna see Guardians?
Actually, I had the opportunity to. My wife asked me if I wanted to go see a movie this weekend, and I said honestly, I can't think of anything I'd like to go see.
Oh no! Well, I'm sorry. We have to jettison you from the Skate Pod cast.
On the nearest inhabitable planet.
Yeah, we'll search for you later.
All right.
Yes.
That's kind of like a wink to a movie we're going to do later.
City Alpha 5 looks pretty good.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else coming out really soon. I guess I'm kind of interested in Baywatch. Stupid as it'll probably be.
But
other than that,
Looks interesting.
Other than that, I don't think we have a whole lot of stuff to talk about right now other than our main movie here.
Yes.
You want to hit
Shall
us
we
up
get
with some trivia, Jay?
I think I can accommodate you on that. The Neverending Story was released in 1984 and currently holds a 82% on Rotten Tomatoes, directed by Wolfgang Peterson. Now, many of you might know him best for his works like The Perfect Storm, Air Force One, Outbreak, In the Line of Fire, and Enemy Mine, which is one I would like to cover at some point. It stars Barrett Oliver as Bastion. He was in the movie Daryl about an android boy, and he was also in Cocoon. It also stars Noah Hathaway as Atreyu. He was Harry Potter in the infamous Troll movie, and he was also in the original Battlestar Galactica from the 70s. The movie was adapted from the book of the same name from 1979, written by Michael Ende. Oddly enough, where the movie ends is about only halfway through the book. Noah Hathaway was hurt a few times during the making of this movie. Once he was thrown off the horse while riding and almost stepped on, and the second time he was almost drowned by being pulled into the elevator that took the horse down the Swamp of Sadness scene. And a third time he almost lost his eye when Gomork the wolf charged out at him. Its claw almost hit him in the eye. Steven Spielberg has the original Orin hanging in a glass case in his office. This was the most expensive film ever produced in Germany at that time. The book's author, Michael Ende, was very unhappy with the film's version of the story and refused to let his name be put on the opening credits. He asked that the movie's title be changed or even canceled. After the studio declined both options, he filed a lawsuit but lost. Falkor is 43 feet long, has a 3-foot head, and 6,000 plastic scales. In the book, Atreyu is green. They tried to do this to Noah, but it didn't work out very well. They said it looked like fungus, so they dropped it. There's a long-standing rumor that the horse died during the Swamp of Sadness scene. This is not true. In fact, Noah was given the horse, but due to the cost of transportation back to the U.S., they decided to leave it in Germany. 2 scenes from the book they wanted to film, but had to be scrapped due to limitations of the time, would have had a swarm of wasps that formed a giant spider, which would have explained why they had to get medicine from the gnomes later in the film. There also was a scene that would have had giant clouds fighting each other, and Atreyu and Falkor would have been caught in the middle. Deep Roy's voice was dubbed for the movie. The name Atreyu actually means Bold Guardian. This movie has 2 live-action sequels, a live-action television show from the early 2000s, and an animated series. All 3 of the major kids, the Childlike Empress, Atreyu, and Bastion, were all recast for the sequel, which I do want to watch the sequel again. I remember seeing it as a kid, and I didn't really have a big problem with it, but everyone says it's just terrible. I like to see that.
I watched it a lot as a kid. As a kid, I thought it was great, but, there are a lot of things I thought were great when I was a kid that are awful.
Yeah, after I rewatched this one, I was trying to remember the sequel, and I'm like, I cannot remember anything about the sequel for the life of me. I could barely remember this one. And when I read that it didn't have the greatest reception, I thought that was kind of odd because I feel like when I was a kid, I liked the second one better, but I don't remember anything about it. Dave, why don't you start? When's the last time you saw this movie? Probably pretty recently, huh?
Yeah, pretty recently. I watched it a lot as a kid, but hadn't really seen it much since then up until recently, and I decided to introduce it to my kids. And obviously the scene where Atreyu's horse is sinking into the swamp is really sad, and my daughter, she looked at me and she said, "I'm gonna cry" during that scene. And I was like, "Why?" And she said, "Because the horse is gonna die." It was pretty funny, but yeah, I loved it as a kid. I remember at one point I had made my own little, I tried to make my own Neverending Story book, like the book in the movie. It's like my attempt at making a prop replica, I guess you could say. And I took a bunch of cardboard and paper, and I tried to take the Orin that's on the cover, and I tried to make that out of yarn and glue. And I remember I had this thing, I took it everywhere I went, but it just fell apart at one point. What I kind of thought, though, was interesting is the intro of the movie itself, that nebulous kind of cloud effect, really kind of reminds me of the Mutara Nebula in Star Trek II. Did anyone else think about that?
There's our first Star Trek reference.
Yep.
If it was a drinking game.
I recently watched Star Trek 3 for an obvious reason. But I have not seen Star Trek 2 in quite some time. It's been a while since I've watched really any of the Star Trek movies. I think before I had watched 3 the other day, the last one I'd seen may have been First Contact and not even the whole thing. Probably a year or 2 ago. Sorry, The Neverending Story. Do you have strong memories of this as a kid?
Yes, I remember we rented it, if I'm not mistaken, and I remember, being amazed by it and afraid of the wolf, and I had fond memories of it. So
Yeah, I think whenever I thought back, because I had such a hard time really remembering these, I just remember that I liked them when I was a kid, both movies. Whenever I tried to think back about it, all I could really remember was Falcor, whose name I couldn't remember. I just remembered the luck dragon that looked like a dog. And the rock guy, the big rock tumbler dude.
yeah,
Those were the only things
His
I can
name's
remember.
Dwayne.
Oh, yes, Dwayne the rock guy. Yeah, before I rewatched it, that was all I could really remember. But then, as I watched it, it started bringing back a lot of memories. Yeah, those were huge movies when we were kids. Those came out like just in time for us to be into them. And a lot of stuff, like in the 80s especially, was like a little bit on the dark side.
yeah.
Even for kids.
A little bit,
And
just a little bit.
Yeah, and this follows that a little bit. Like you said, like the horse scene is pretty sad. I remember being teary-eyed when I saw that as a kid. Watching it as an adult,
I never
isn't a big
cried.
deal. Well, I'm a real boy. So yeah, I remember when I got to that being all sad when I saw that as a kid, and that wolf was scary.
Yeah.
When did you last watch it, Brandon?
I last recently watched it maybe about like a month and a half ago, and before that, I had recently watched it again a few months before that. HBO currently has it up. If you have like their streaming service or their channel, you can check it out. But
Yeah,
that's where
and
I watched it last.
I actually regularly watch this movie anyway with my kids because they just love it. So
Okay, so I think out of the three of us, I don't know about Brandon. I don't think you are, Dave, but I'm a fan of the Goonies. Did anyone pick up on the musical cues, like when he's in the bookstore talking with the clerk when he first starts reading? The music that's going under those scenes remind me a lot of the music from the Goonies when Mikey is telling the story of One-Eyed Willie. Did anyone else notice that or pick up on that?
I did not notice that.
And that's mainly because I've never seen Goonies.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
You still have not seen it?
Still.
I feel like you missed out then.
Well, I'm not as bad as Dave. I didn't see it until I was like 22, 21.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen it since actually either.
Wow.
I might have to go back and watch it sooner or later.
Dang.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is not part of my childhood.
Yeah, that's a shame, I feel. Yeah, I felt like if you listen, I'm not saying it's identical, but I definitely felt like there was a similar feel with the music that Mikey, you hear while Mikey's telling the story about One-Eyed Willie, and everything that happened there with when the clerk is telling him, not this book, these books are safe, but this book is dangerous. And then when he finally gets it to the attic, he's, starting to read, and you kind of hear that same kind of music. It's very similar in the vibe. And
when I was a kid, I wouldn't have picked up on this stuff.
No, it's nothing I never picked up until just yesterday when I watched it.
Did you feel that maybe that book owner was like trying to get him to steal the book?
He seemed pleased, like he wanted him to. I think the whole it was almost like a reverse psychology thing by telling him it's too dangerous, play it safe with this and that. I think he wanted him to take that book.
I got a little bit of that when
I wasn't sure about that.
Because I think he saw him as an equal when he told him all the books that he had read. I think he felt like this kid's kind of an equal, like a diamond in the rough. Like this kid is like me when so he kind of, because he said, the arcade's down the street. And when this kid was naming all the movie or books that he had read, I think they had that common ground. So yeah, I think he wanted him to read it. I'm sorry, Dave.
Yeah. Oh no, it's not. I was just thinking, I wasn't sure if that was his intention, just because the scene where he takes the book, he smiles when the kid leaves, but then it kind of looks like his reaction is he looks down and then notices, oh no, my book has been taken.
See, I didn't get that vibe at all. He looked, to me, I took it as he was happy.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
What do you think, Brandon?
Well, I felt like it could have went either way. They played it subtly, but I felt like he was doing kind of like the reverse psychology thing. Yeah. I'd have to rewatch it and pay harder attention to his reaction after he realizes that the book is missing.
Okay.
Something that I noticed watching it as an adult, like the conversation they have before that scene at the breakfast table, it seems a little bit like cold and harsh.
Okay.
Did anybody seem to notice that?
Well, I think that was because the mother had just died and they were probably both dealing with that in their own way. And
yeah, that's what I got.
It seemed a little, I don't know, just the dad seemed almost a little cold about it. Like maybe that was how he was dealing with it, just like trying to like get through life. But it was almost like he was just very straightforward. There wasn't like a lot of jokiness or like, hey buddy, I know this or that. It was like, you go to school, get good grades. Maybe I was just picking up on something that wasn't there.
I took it as that.
Okay.
But maybe, I don't know.
I did too. And speaking of the breakfast table, did anyone notice what his dad was consuming for breakfast?
Orange juice and an egg, I think, blended.
Yeah. It was the
orange juice
Rocky breakfast.
and one raw egg blended.
Yep.
He was getting ready to fight Apollo Creed.
Yeah.
Is that the Rocky breakfast? That's another movie I haven't seen.
Yeah, he put a bunch of eggs in a glass and drank it when he was training.
Well, but did he blend it with orange juice though?
No, he literally cracked them in a glass and just drank the egg yolk and everything.
I just
that's
don't
something
understand.
people do to like consume protein if they don't have like time to cook.
Okay,
well,
so I wouldn't suggest doing it.
And I thought it was also cool at the breakfast table. You saw a picture of Superman on the Ziploc bags dispenser on the table, and
oh really?
Yeah, that was right around the time when like the Superman movies were being made, and so it was probably some kind of marketing thing because this was 1984. Superman 3 had just come out prior to this movie. And
were they the same motion picture company?
Prior, I said prior.
No, it was not the same motion picture company. I believe that Superman 3 and 4 were both like canon films. Am I right?
That sounds right, but I don't know.
Wait,
I think the first two were somebody else. Like,
yeah, the first two.
Who put out Superman? Dave.
Richard Donner directed the original.
No, I mean like Universal, 20th Century Fox. Who put them out?
WB.
Was it Warner Brothers?
Yeah, it was.
I think that the second two, or I know at least the fourth one went to Canon.
What do you mean to Canon?
There was a film company called Canon Films, and they're notorious for.
They were all Warner Brothers.
Was it under? Okay, so Canon's under Warner Brothers.
No, I don't know about that, but I'm saying all four movies were Warner Brothers.
Maybe I have my information mixed up. I thought fourth one was Canon. Regardless, those 3 and 4 weren't as good as 1 and 2.
Well, it's funny that you should say that is because originally 1 and 2 were supposed to be one long movie, and then a whole bunch of issues happened with the director, and like a bunch of behind the scenes drama went down, and they split it into 2 movies, and that's why you have a director's cut of part 2 that came out 10 years ago, and it's a whole thing.
So the Neverending Story.
Anyway, back to
that. Did anyone notice this? At one point, it sounded like someone said Fantasia, as in referencing a city, like the Ivory Tower, like as if it was a city. Then everywhere else, it sounded like they were talking about the whole land was Fantasia. Did anyone catch that?
I didn't catch that.
I didn't catch that. I always took the Ivory Tower to be as if it was like the capital of the whole entire
But at
land.
one point, I thought someone said, let's get to the city of Fantasia. Like I think when they were talking about the Nothing, they said something like, do you think the city of Fantasia still stands? Or something like that. But then every other time, it sounds like they talk about it as if it's the whole land they live in. And I never noticed that until this time.
Been during the scene with like the Mad Hatter, the caveman guy, and the bat.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Are you talking about when they first go to the Ivory Tower, Brandon?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know if you noticed just how many weird costumes there are in that scene.
Oh, I did notice that. That was one of the things that I just, every time that I couldn't get enough of that scene, I was always trying to look around at like all the weird people standing up there listening to that guy talk.
Oh yeah, I would definitely love to see what they were.
Well, the craziest thing was, to me anyway, the all those like characters, they looked like a combination of characters from Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland mixed with Star Wars characters wearing costumes from Steven Spielberg's movie Hook.
Yeah, it was definitely a weird group of people. There were some people with really big heads.
Yep.
Yeah, like
they look like they had rock bodies.
Yeah.
Those heads from Easter Island.
Did you see the ones with 4 faces?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, those are so creepy. Everything looks so creepy. What were they thinking? I don't know if they're trying to get kids to like this movie or give them nightmares.
Well, I thought it was cool. Like, it made me wonder, like, what was this world like before it started to fall apart?
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking, man, I wish they would have cut a little closer on some of the other creatures. I would have loved to seen like what they were.
Mhm.
You know what always kind of made to me? It always seemed like this was some sort of convergence of multiple imaginations from kids all converging in one place.
Yeah, I actually think that was part of the point. It seemed to me like, well, we can get in towards the end, like what we think the movie meant. But yeah, I noticed a lot of that. Like the one guy is, that rides the snail is obviously a nod to the Mad Hatter.
Right.
So yeah, it seemed like there was kind of a blend from other fantasy in there too.
The character, the one specific character I noticed in that scene was, all I can say is it was like a fish character. It was like just a regular, realistic like fish, except like the size of a human. I don't know what it was, but that
Like
was
those guys that were hanging out in the transporter room in the Next Generation.
what?
Ding. Yeah, I think one of those guys was one of the Fleetwood Mac guitarists.
Yeah, I'm impressed by the special effects in this movie because I don't think that it had the budget that a lot of Hollywood stuff would have, being made in Germany and all.
Right.
The
I kind of
city
wonder
looks
if
great.
I kind of wonder if they made that intro smoky nebula effect the same way they did for the nebula in Star Trek 2 in like a giant,
Ding.
tank of water. I'm wondering about that because it looked so similar.
Yeah, I'm sure there were a lot of similar techniques back then for certain things.
Did you think about that, Josh?
I mean, a little bit only this most recent time watching it. I definitely think it looked like liquid, and I know they used a tank for the nebula scene.
Right.
And with various colored things, and but yeah, never before until just this most recent time.
Right. Okay.
So one thing I thought was weird is when Atreyu gets his mission, it's a big deal about he can't take any weapons, and I thought, why? Where did they get that idea that he couldn't take any weapons? What was the purpose? They tell him, well, he says, well, where do I begin? And I think I can't remember how they worded it, but like they couldn't give him any direction. So he's traveling aimlessly. Why? Just pick a direction and start going. I hope you find what you're looking for. What am I looking for? I don't know. Like, how is it they knew nothing, but they knew enough that he couldn't take weapons?
They knew nothing because it was the nothing.
I guess, but I just always thought that was strange. That's the one thing they knew.
The instructions were definitely vague.
I mean, I think it just makes it sound like a big, a risky journey, but it just makes no sense.
One thing that I was wondering. Oh, well, go ahead, Dave.
Well, I was gonna say, a lot of this movie doesn't make sense, but it seemed to me when like the fact that he's not taking weapons and stuff like that, it always came off to me as to mean this is whatever you decide to do on this mission it's going to be heavily dependent on how involved the reader is, in this case being Bastian. Somehow the reader is somehow going to affect the mission, and so any good parts or bad parts that he runs into, it's going to be somehow or another responsible.
Yeah, that is kind of what ended up happening.
But he reacted to, when he would react to something, like let's say something scared him, he would scream, and then you would see it affected the characters. But he was actually reading words that were already down. It wasn't like as he imagined it, that's how it came to be. It seemed like the words were there, he reacted, and then the characters might have a new reaction because of the fact that he reacted in the first place.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Like they did have a new reaction because of him, because he would read, like right after he screamed, he'd look down and read that they reacted to it and be like, no, that's impossible.
That's impossible. Yeah, exactly. Whereas if someone else read it and maybe they didn't scream about it, they just would keep going on with whatever they would say next.
Makes me wonder if he had jumped to the end of the book, if the pages would be all blank before he got there the right way.
I don't know.
You know what I mean? Like maybe the book was being written as he read it.
Yeah.
I always took it to mean like this book is probably, each page is, being written as he reads it. That's what I always thought it meant.
Now, where was he reading the book at? Because I was trying to figure it out. Was it at the top of the school? Because it just seemed like
it looked like it was an space of some kind.
They just had like random weird stuff up there, like the stuffed wolf and old moose head, and there were broken windows and stuff up there. And it was really dirty.
The skeleton.
Yeah.
Yeah, I actually.
It just seemed like a bunch of random.
He's supposedly supposed to be in the attic of a school, but it looks more like he's in the attic of a museum or something. Like I can understand like the skeleton for like health class or whatever, or but yeah, there's like the wolf heads, and it's very strange room.
it seemed like
Mhm.
they said, okay, we want a set that looks like an attic, and then they weren't specific on it. Because don't we see him walking around in school between being in that attic?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
assume it was the top of the school, but it didn't look like you were saying, and it doesn't look like the attic for a school.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Yeah,
I
it
don't
definitely
know,
looks like a museum.
how many schools have attics?
Yeah. I don't know.
This one.
Yeah, in the middle of the city. Now, was that city supposed to be like New York, or did they ever say?
They don't say, but I looked it up.
It was filmed in Vancouver.
Right, exactly. But it's most of it was actually filmed in Germany, but the city scenes were Vancouver.
Okay.
This movie has a really good production. Like you can tell, like a lot of the shots are real locations, like for like the riding scenes, but even the scenes that you could tell are set, the sets look really good. Like there's, it doesn't look bad. And like like the scenes on the I guess I can't remember what desert they said they went to for a certain scene of him where he's out in the desert and stuff. But you can tell they put a lot into it. It looks really good.
I've seen a lot of other movies that have way worse production values, and it definitely, that's something you need if you want your movie to be successful or good. And this movie, like the special effects are all pretty good. They still hold up for the most part. The animatronics are great. Like even when he was walking around with those small people, I don't know if they were gnomes. Like one guy was a scientist and his wife was a witch.
Yep.
You know what that reminded me of? Those the characters. It
Princess
reminded
Bride.
me. Yes,
Billy
exactly.
Crystal.
Yes.
Yeah,
I expected the female one to just bust in the door and go, "Liar!"
Marriage.
What were you gonna say though, Brandon?
Yeah, just like even when Atreyu is standing next to them, Atreyu is just a kid, but he looks like a giant to them.
Yeah.
And like they're standing right next to each other. And I know you can do camera tricks to get people to look giant and get it to look really good, but like you didn't see like any you couldn't tell that they're using any type of special effect or anything. It looked really great.
I wondered if they were doing like they did with Kong with the rear projector imaging.
You can usually tell something, like there's like an area around the person or the people where like they'll either be slightly more in focus or there'll be some kind of a shadow that'll give it away a little bit. And I didn't notice any of that.
I thought it was interesting how like you hear a lot about other things in Fantasia, which gives it like the sense of being a lot bigger without seeing it. Like at the beginning when the Rockbiter, the Snail Racer, and the whatever that other guy was, they're talking about like, oh, I come from the north and, the people there, blah, blah, blah. And, this guy's talking about like, this place, wherever he's from. And it just, all these things you hear about. And I think even in the big meeting before they send him on his mission, you hear a lot about like, different like further out places, like almost like it's separated into states or providences, like which gives it this sense of being really big, even though you don't get to see all this stuff. I just liked how they did that. They really made it sound much larger.
Yeah, and I've heard that every now and then they toy with the idea of doing more, but I don't know if it's a rights issue or it just doesn't get off the ground. But it seems like the type of world where you could keep revisiting it and not run out of ideas or places to go.
Yeah.
It would make for a good series. Well I guess it is a series now. There's 3 or 4 of them.
There's 3 movies, yes.
And I have seen the third one, which I can also barely remember. But yeah, I remember thinking it was pretty bad. Like, weren't the bullies from like Power Rangers in it or something like that?
Jack Black was in it.
Okay.
And the group is called the Nasties.
Yes.
I never saw the third one, but as far as I know, this was actually Jack Black's first acting role.
Yes, that is true.
Yes. Next point.
Interesting.
Okay, so I thought this was kind of weird. Atreyu, his horse sinks into the swamp of sadness, right? Now he's all sad when he loses his horse and he's crying. If he's already in the swamp of sadness and he's extremely sad, why did he not sink? How is it he was able to,
I wondered that as well. I thought, well, maybe he was fighting his sadness, but if a tear is rolling down your cheek, you got to be a little bit sad.
Yeah, he seemed pretty upset. But I just thought that was kind of interesting that you think like he was in the most vulnerable spot emotionally, and he's literally in a swamp called the Swamp of Sadness, and yet he somehow manages to stay above it.
Yeah, and it didn't seem like he started to sink until after he basically spoke with, what did they call it, the Oracle?
Oh,
not
the turtle. No, the Oracle was the Sphinx type statues. What did he call the turtle?
I thought the Oracle was the woman in the kitchen baking cookies.
No, that was a witch.
The oracles were the 2 statues, the 2 giant statues.
Oh wait, the Oracle, I'm thinking was the Matrix.
Oh, I didn't know what you're talking about.
She's also called the Oracle in the Matrix.
Okay.
Sorry,
I
go
think they
ahead.
called it the Ancient One.
Something like that.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
Yeah, I remember when I as soon as I saw it, it's like, oh yeah, it's like a big turtle and it's allergic to him. And then I remembered it when he starts sneezing and blowing
Mora.
off the tree.
Morla?
Morla. That sounds
Morla,
right.
or also known as the Ancient One.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and it wasn't until after he spoke with the big turtle, Morla, that he started to kind of sink. And then you think that the wolf is going to get him. And that's when Luck Dragon shows up. Lucky for him.
Gamork, the wolf, was terrifying. I remember especially the part where he's looking at the murals on the various walls, and then he gets to the one he obviously doesn't recognize having happened yet, and it's of the wolf. And then when you turn around, or he turns around and you see it, that always creeped me out a lot as a kid, and especially the way the wolf's eyes kept like
Glowing green.
yeah, but they got like at certain parts, like I think mostly when the lightning would flash, like his eyes like widened and it looked even creepier.
Yeah, they did a good job at making that look scary.
Yeah,
that's like the one part of the movie that my daughter even can't even watch. She tells me to fast forward through it or whatever.
Now,
She
that
doesn't
wolf
like it.
reminds me of two things. It reminds me of American Werewolf in London, and it also reminds me of when Goosebumps had their TV show. The episode about like there's an episode about a camp where there was a werewolf, and that werewolf looked very similar to Gamork.
I always thought he was much larger though. When I was a kid, like I always thought he looked like not as big as the turtle, of course, but like he looked like he was, and he was larger than a normal wolf, obviously. But like I just always thought he was actually even bigger than when he actually charges him and you see him like dead there. I thought he always looked like he was even should have been bigger than that. Like when he was hiding in the hole, like he just looked huge to me.
Yeah, he did look really big. I guess he covered up Atreyu pretty good, but Atreyu was just a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a pretty gruesome scene too, with him like basically stabbing the wolf.
Yeah, I mean, in hindsight, I mean, I guess it's a kid's movie all in all, but like the scene is very quick. Like, yeah. I mean, there was really no fight to it at all. You know, I mean, it just, he charged him and he got him, you know, but, and there's nothing wrong with that. It just, they didn't do much with that, or maybe that's how the book was. I don't know.
Yeah. They weren't afraid to do that stuff back then in a kid's movie. Even if it was quick.
Well, I don't think still at this point, I don't think there was a PG-13. I think it literally went from PG to R still.
We'll have to find out when that PG-13 kicked in. I know it wasn't, I think it was at least in the mid 80s, if not a little bit later.
Right, because I know that's one of the issues with Temple of Doom was because of the fact that there was no in-between rating.
Yeah, Swamp Thing also had some issues.
But one of the scenes I want to talk about is when Bastion screams and the turtle and Atreyu hear him, and then they have Bastion actually stop and say, you know, they couldn't have heard me. That's impossible. I really don't care for that in movies where they do this thing where they basically have to have a character explain what just happened in case you don't catch it, like because they show
they do that in Suicide Squad too.
Okay,
but anyway, go on. I was gonna say, I'll tell you later.
Okay, I know what you're saying there, but if he didn't say that, then we wouldn't have known that he read that they knew that they heard him.
But here's the thing: they showed the turtle and him stop and both look around, like, "What was that? Where did that come from?"
But we wouldn't have had that information that he was also reading that they had heard him.
They could have just showed a shot though of him looking like confused, like what? Like they didn't have to have him say, "That's impossible. They couldn't have heard me. It's just a story." You know, like they didn't need to have him say it. I just felt like it would have been enough just to have him look like perplexed, like, did that just really happen?
When your inner monologue is outspoken, yeah, that's one of the things that kind of annoys me sometimes.
There's certain, like Batman Begins, we talked about that when we talked briefly about Batman Begins. There's a scene where, if you know, Batman already explained the whole monorail and the microwave emitter thing, and then the old guy's got if that microwave emitter gets to the mains and the thing, the whole thing's gonna go kablooey. You know, like just. I
feel like we could have a conversation with you doing that voice and me just being a confused Batman.
No, I gotta tell you, what's so funny to me about that is when Batman Begins came out, that was like one of my biggest gripes with the movie while watching it. I'd talk to my brother Matthew about it, and we'd just be laughing about the fact that we just heard the same plot point explained by three different characters.
It was enough to have
brought that up now, and I do not remember that at all. I'm gonna have to go back and watch it.
It was enough to have Batman tell Gordon. You understood the But anyway, back on topic.
Back to the Neverending Story.
Who's next?
Yeah, I remember those oracles being pretty scary too.
And talk about detail.
Yeah, there's some detail there. What's funny is like
I really appreciate that detail.
I really appreciate the anatomically correct detail.
I felt as a kid like I didn't notice that as much as like
I didn't notice.
Had I been like a teenager, I probably, but
yeah,
like I didn't care. I just remember them frying that guy in like the suit of armor.
Yeah,
and that was pretty gruesome too. Like when he got up there, didn't Atreyu kind of like open it up and it was just
like the wind blew or something, and you see his like burned up face.
Yeah, it's like dust and bones there.
Yeah.
Concerning the Oracle, why not just walk around? Why did he have to walk through? Like, I guess, I don't know. It's like, I get it, but I don't. Like, I guess it was a test of his courage or his pureness of heart or whatever. But like, realistically, it seemed like he could have just walked around them. It would have maybe taken a little longer, but I don't know.
Well, his world was disappearing at a rapid rate.
What's that?
Yeah.
His world was disappearing at a rapid rate, so I guess quickest way is the way you had to do it.
Yeah. So I kind of think it was cool that my friend at work, the one I was telling you, Brandon, about, what's that?
Ken?
No, Nate is his name actually.
Okay.
He's really into Nate Dogg. He's really into the one I was telling you about, the Dark Tower and stuff. But anyway, he's also really into dragons. And he was kind of talking a lot about like the Chinese dragon versus the European dragon and like all these like subgenres of dragons and stuff. But it's kind of interesting and a little refreshing that Falkor is, to me at least, more based off a Chinese dragon. The very long body. There's no wings, but yet it flies.
Like the face of a dog or a lion. And
like the short legs, like, and the way he kind of like swoops up and down while he flies. It's kind of a cool and unique design because most people do a variation of the European dragon,
which is like a brontosaurus.
Well, yeah, but Nate was actually telling me how like most movies, when they show dragons, they're actually not dragons. They're it's something with a W. Oh man, what did he call it?
Worms?
No,
wyverns?
Warlocks?
No, it's like WY something. Man.
Yeah, wyvern.
Wyvern, yes. Because he was saying how a true European dragon, like you said, it's like a brontosaurus. It walks on all fours. Its wings have little like thumbs, if you will, to grab, where a lot of the dragons they show in most modern movies, it has just the hind legs, and then its front legs are actually a part of the arms of the wings, and that's a wyvern or whatever you said. Mm-hmm. But anyway, that's not the point. I just thought it was kind of cool to have a more of a Chinese looking dragon for a movie. You don't really see that much.
No, yeah, that was an interesting choice. Now I wonder if it was that way in the book or if that was a decision that they made for production.
If you look at the cover for the book, they show Falkor on it, and I mean, it looks a little different, but you can tell it's him.
Now, is that a cover that came out before the movie, or was it something that was released after the movie?
I think it was the '79 cover. Okay. So it looks original to me, but because it looks different enough, but yeah, I can still tell who's supposed to be what. And he basically kind of has that look there too, the long body and all that.
And like you're saying, it's interesting that, because where did the stories come out from? Like who wrote the books?
End was his last name, but he was
nationality.
He's German. Everything. Yeah.
A lot of that is probably has some kind of base in like Germanic folklore, or at least that area of Europe. So it's an interesting choice to have the story from Europe to have a Chinese style dragon in it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure he borrowed from various things too, but yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and it probably helped because it was more targeted towards kids. Like if you're going to do that dragon and you want it to be a friendly dragon, to have it kind of remind you of a big puppy.
Right.
That makes sense.
Let's see, what else do I have in my notes here? Was there anything else you wanted to bring up, Dave or Josh?
So when I was a kid, the big thing was, I remember we rented it, like I said, none of us could ever understand what the new name that Bastion screams.
Exactly. That's one of my biggest gripes of the movie is that.
And also, like, why did he have to, like, she's like, Bastion, give me a new name, please, and then like he feels the need to like climb up that thing and scream it out the window. It was like, what was the point of that? Do you guys know what he named her?
Did he leave the book behind? Because it seems to me he should have yelled it into the book.
That's what I would have done. I would have yelled it into the book. But
do you know what he named her though?
The storm was good. I do. I have the same complaint. I can never understand what he says.
But no, do you guys know now?
It's not audible.
I think it said it on the Wikipedia, but I don't remember.
Moonchild.
That's what he named her?
Moonchild.
It sounded like he really elongated it then because that's what, 2 syllables? And it sounded like he yelled something that took 5
I
seconds to get out.
always assumed that it was his mother's name.
Yeah, that's what they make it out to be, but I find it fun unless that was like a nickname, like maybe that her
His mom was a hippie.
I guess.
That's odd. Moonchild.
Yeah.
It seems like it would fit the story so much nicer if it was just his mom's name.
Yeah, that's weird. Huh. I don't know about that. But okay. Whatever boats your float.
One of the things I noticed about Bastion in particular, like he's read all these fantasy books. He's super into fantasy, reading in general, but like a lot of the stuff he mentions, I think like Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit. He mentions a few things like that.
Yep.
And
he mentions 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, Tarzan, Lord of the Rings. What else does he mention? He mentions quite a few.
Yeah, and it's
Twilight, Hunger Games.
Like books are a good escape already, but then like he's also doubling up on how he's escaping by the types of books he gets into. And it seems like without those books, he's living a pretty crappy life, and he's just trying to escape and use his fantasies and his creativity, his imagination to get away from the real world. Like his dad says he's having problems in school. He's getting bullied and thrown into garbage.
They actually continue that narrative into the sequel.
Do they?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I have to go back and rewatch the second one.
I just remember I got a cramp. He kept
got a cramp. Oh, wait a second. No, was he on the swim team in the second one?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it like diving or swimming?
Well, or maybe diving. Yeah, I mean, because he was on. I just remember he was on the high board, and like then he imagined it to look like a big waterfall, like Niagara or something.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, I had a little bit of flashback there. I remember a little bit more of it. Yeah. So I thought it was pretty interesting that like he was super into fantasy and he was doing that to get us to just get away. And I feel like the idea of the story here is that kids need to read and they need to use their imaginations. Otherwise, what will you be if your imagination dies? You can't let your imagination die. And that's what was happening to Fantasia. So people weren't reading anymore. And this fantasy world was just falling apart because nobody was paying attention to it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what I got.
It's an interesting story. I like that.
Yeah, as a kid, I didn't really think about it or pick up on it too much. But then they even mention in there, like, they start to mess with your head a little bit when I think at the very end, the princess is talking to Bastion and she actually says something that implies that Bastion is part of another story that other people are observing, which would be us, the audience. And she says something about the audience too, which is like they mentioned the audience watching the movie, watching this kid read the book, and we're watching what's happening.
I did not catch that.
The book. Yeah, it's crazy.
They did that on Star Trek once.
Ding ding.
No, like there was an episode of Next Generation where at the end of an episode, Picard said, "Hey, you never know. Maybe your whole life is actually conveniently playing on a little box sitting on someone's coffee table or something like that."
And that was literally what was going on with Bastion. She suggested that to him, and then as a viewer of the movie, it makes you, toy with the idea very briefly that like, what if somebody's watching your life? And it's kind of funny that I didn't realize that the movie went that deep into like existential thought.
Right.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
So Bastion stays all night in a school. Did his dad like call the police? Did they bother to say, let's go to the school and check, or let's go wherever? Like, I mean, I know that
his dad was stuck in a business meeting.
I guess, like, I mean,
he probably had food
because
poisoning.
the movie, even when it ends, they never show him like go home and his dad's like, "Where have you been?" or nothing like that. Like
they just show him riding Falcor to terrorize his bullies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's just something to think about when you're older. But like, I would have never thought of that as a kid.
I was wondering that too. Like, I wonder what his dad is doing right now, or if he thinks he's like already in bed. I wonder. It wouldn't surprise me if they had like that type of relationship where when the dad comes home, he has like a glass of scotch and just assumes Bastion's sleeping.
Yeah, maybe.
I think Bastion has to cook his own dinner.
The rock biter
Yes.
guy, he always made me hungry when I was a kid. Like I'd see him eating those rocks and I'd get like all like
think about all those great pebbles outside sitting at the crib.
Well, I'd get it. I'd want some rock candy, honestly, but I would see him like eating those huge rocks and he'd be like, "They look like good, big, strong hands, don't they?" And I'd just be like, "I want a burger."
Well, that's when he was talking about how he was trying to hold on to his friends, though.
Yeah.
And then nothing took them out of his hands.
Strong hands.
Which that is in itself is pretty, when you think about it, it's
Sad.
pretty deep. And yeah, like said, in a kid's movie that basically he's saying he was trying to hold on to his friends
And he failed.
and basically like death just ripped them right from his grasp. Like it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the way it used to be. There's a lot of goofy stuff out. Like, I haven't seen, admittedly, a Disney movie in a while or anything like that, like any of these CG kids movies.
Mhm.
I know Toy Story gets pretty deep.
Yes.
Especially that third one. But
Yes.
like, it seems like a lot of stuff we watched when we were kids back in the 80s, like, they weren't afraid to be a little bit deeper and they weren't afraid to be a little bit darker. And I wonder if maybe that's good for kids in a way, to the point where they're kind of wimpy.
Snowflakes.
Wait, what did you say?
I said snowflakes.
Oh,
So I'm not sure that stuff is around like that anymore. I mean, if you look at, this movie, it has a little bit of a darker tone to it. The Dark
Yeah.
Crystal had a darker tone to it.
now that's
Yeah.
one I have not seen. I tried
Neither
to
have I.
watch it one time, but I never finished it.
Oh.
And I
well,
know it's kind of related, not directly related, but it's similar
To
with
Labyrinth.
the Labyrinth, which I am familiar with and saw a lot as a kid. But
What kid?
say what?
What kid?
When I was a kid, I said.
A babe?
Yeah. Oh, okay.
The
Babe
babe
with
with the
power.
podcast.
What
So-
podcast?
The Skate Podcast. So we'll have to add that one to the list then too, the Dark Crystal.
Absolutely.
But yeah, like thinking back on it, just like even like in the kids shows, like all the death that I saw before I even went to preschool is pretty amazing. Like I remember another one, Secret of the Lost Land or Lost World. It was called Baby for short. People nicknamed it Baby, and it's about dinosaurs in Africa. Did you guys see that?
Was it?
Never
It was a
saw it.
cartoon.
It was live action.
I'm not
I
sure.
never saw it.
Oh man, we're gonna add that to the list too. But like, yeah, that one's filled with like, there's two dinosaurs living in Africa, and they have a little baby, and these poachers come and they want to make some money, so they just obliterate the parents. And at the beginning of the movie, like I went back and watched it not too long ago, and there's a bunch of like topless African women, and I'm like, holy crap! I watched this as a kid. I don't remember any of that. So-
There's a movie, a friend of mine way back in the day, we used to watch. It was an animated movie. It was about rabbits called Watership Down.
That movie should not be shown to anybody.
Yes.
It should be locked away in a vault.
Yes. And we were kids and we just thought it was it was a cartoon movie. And yeah, that is one of the bloodiest, violent,
That was one of the worst days of school. I've
darkest,
had.
strange. I mean, I know it's based off a book. It is strange.
Yeah, if you go to YouTube and look for Watership Down, there's like a little music video where it just shows all the worst parts. And like I've shown it to friends like now, we're in our 30s, and they're looking at it and they're saying that's a nightmare. Like I don't understand why that's a cartoon or
When
why
they're,
they would
like,
show that in school.
Trapped in the rabbit hole, and there's like they're all like cramming into it, and like they can't breathe and like suffocating. And oh man, that's
Yeah,
nuts.
one of them gets like a snare around its neck and is suffocating to death. One gets eaten by an eagle. Dogs tear apart other ones.
Yeah.
And then they're fighting each other. Like, what could
Wow.
possibly be wrong with a cartoon rabbit movie, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll show that to my kids, and then bam, it's
Yep.
World War III.
Anyway,
I never saw it.
yeah, but
You know, the animatronics I felt like on Gamork were completely awful. Did you ever notice like how his
well,
words were like
I mean,
not
I think
anywhere close
for their time,
to-
I think they were probably
Yeah.
good. Yeah, when you look at it now, but you got to also look at the technology of the time, the techniques of the time. You know,
Yeah.
you gotta. It's like the way they adjust ticket numbers for inflation now, so they can compare movies. From back in the day, you gotta also just look at for what it was and what they had at the time.
Yeah, I noticed like Falcor was like that too a little bit.
Yeah,
where, like,
he was off.
It wasn't great, but like everything else about them was superb. It's just they couldn't sync up the mouth and the words quite right. But yeah, I blame that just on the technology of the time. Nowadays, I'm sure they could do amazing animatronic work like they did in Jurassic Park, even.
Right.
But I'm sure they just CG it over. It's easier. to
Right.
just be
That's
lazy in front of your
that's the
computer.
way most reboots do things nowadays. If they
Yeah.
ever did a reboot of Neverending Story, that's
Well,
what would
we can talk about that at the very end because there is a little information on that. But okay,
Uh-oh.
the Oracle.
Leave my
I'm a little-
childhood alone, Hollywood.
What does the Oracle actually do? I was as I was watching this time, I didn't get it because like I don't understand what what does he need it for? Like it didn't seem like it did too much for him. Like they gave it to him and he doesn't really he needs the Oracle. He doesn't need his weapons, but it seemed like just the opposite. It almost seemed like, because it didn't lead him in any direction. They even say at one point when Bastian's telling us what's happening that he had been, traveling for, days or whatever, and, found nothing. So it doesn't seem like it's leading him in the right direction.
The Oracle is basically two intertwined snakes eating each other, yeah?
Yes.
More or less, yeah.
I took that as like symbolism of like infinity.
Okay.
They're always going to be eating each other. It's a never-ending circle, hence the never-ending story. And then also it's a story that's being created because a kid is watching it. The movie is being created because we're watching it. And then the idea is that what are we? Like, it never ends. It's a cycle.
Okay.
That's the way I saw it.
I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense to me, but for some reason, as I was watching it, I was just like, really.
As far as what it does specifically,
yeah,
I don't know.
Now, I think in the sequel, they had it do more. I think that was actually the thing that he could use to make wishes.
Yeah, wasn't it something like if he made the third wish, bad things would happen?
Well, basically, in the second one, every wish he made, he lost a memory.
Oh, and he would completely forget who he is if he made that
right,
third one.
And they show his memories as these little, it was like this weird little like thing with like a little track, and they would come in the form of like a mini crystal ball, and they would roll down to this like receptacle, and then the witch would pick one up and she could look into it and see a memory of his. Mm-hmm. But in this one, it has no such purpose. It doesn't do any of those things. It was something they added on for the sequel, or maybe
I remember thinking how steampunkish that seemed.
What
the whole thing of the memories turning into like the thing that
memory
looked
marbles?
like was it like it was like marbles or something rolling down a track or something, filling up a jar or something.
Yeah, they were about the size of a baseball.
I imagine that if they had kept going with the series or had a couple more good ones and not that third one, like they probably would have added more that it could do. And I imagine like in each movie, it would probably be doing different things.
Yeah.
Like its power is probably unlimited. It's just specifically for that story what they need it to do.
Right. So out of all the kid actors, I thought Atreyu and the Childlike Empress, I thought were very good personally, but I thought Bastian was not so good.
As far as kid actors go, I'd say he's average.
Oh, see, really? I didn't think he was that good. I thought Atreyu and the Childlike Empress
that's
were
kind of
good.
a knock on just child actors.
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I guess you don't expect too much, but I thought, all things considered, I thought the other two did really good, and then I thought he was like kind of.
She was a little odd. I thought she did well.
Okay.
There was something slightly odd about her. I don't know if it was her makeup or the way she delivered her lines. Not saying she was bad.
Yeah.
But I did think that Atreyu was really good, and I was surprised it didn't seem like. I think he only mentioned a couple of other things that he was in.
Yeah, Atreyu. He, like I said, I know he was in the original '70s Battlestar Galactica, and what else was he in? Oh yeah, he was in Troll, but
and then he became a band.
What?
Well, I guess he's a tattoo artist now. He owns his own parlor, but
there's a band called Atreyu. Am I right?
I believe there is actually.
There is a band called Atreyu.
I believe there is. Barry Oliver, though, Bastian, he was in the movie Daryl and Cocoon. So he's been in a few things too, but I don't know. I just didn't think he did very well in this movie, or maybe, I don't know. I'm not sure.
I'm not going to say acting is easy.
It could have been, though, because they had him acting against people. Like basically Atreyu and the Childlike Empress got to act with each other or other people, where a lot of Bastian stuff, he had to basically just talk to himself. Maybe that had something to do with it. I don't know. Maybe that's
maybe if you're working with somebody, it's easier, though.
Oh, for sure. Exactly.
So I don't know. His acting didn't take me out of it, but
no, I'm not saying it. It's
deliverance of certain lines and stuff was.
Yeah, I know it's noticeable, and it's kind of like, but that's impossible.
Yeah.
But anyway,
I love when he's like talking to a sandwich. No, I better save the rest for later.
Yeah. No. There's too far to go. Yeah.
No,
it's a great idea. Remember that part?
Yeah. Yes.
I'm hungry.
Yeah, and I got when Bastian's eating his food.
Oh, gee. I know what you're. I remember this. I remember you doing this, Dave. Continue.
Oh man! So he eats his apple, and then he eats the apple core itself. And when they find the ivory tower floating in space, he just swallows the whole apple core. I always thought that was so gross. Like when it even made like the worst kind of slimy sound effect.
I remember you always overdid that sound effect every time we watched it.
I always had a hard time. Like even as a kid, I had a hard time watching this scene. Like you just see him and he'd go, apple core. So it was just I was always really kind of disturbed by that. The fact that, I mean, sound effect or no sound effect, the fact that he would eat the apple core.
I've eaten apple cores before.
Really?
Yeah.
I've never eaten a single apple core my entire life.
I think I may have.
I mean, I don't do it on a regular basis, but I've definitely eaten apple cores
Every
before.
time I'm eating an apple, if I even get too close to the core, I start to freak out a little bit.
It's just more apple.
Yeah, I know.
I used to think there was wood in there.
It's like harder, and it's like, I don't know, those little sharp, harder pieces can get stuck in.
I know you're not supposed to eat
between your teeth,
but I do it sometimes anyway.
And then I'd always freak out that there's going to be an apple growing inside my belly and all that stuff.
That's why we call you Davy Appleseed.
That's why my friends call me Whiskers. I'm curious like a cat.
So, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, what were we going to say? Go ahead.
No, I insist.
I was just going to ask you what the news on a new one was.
Oh, so I guess they have been trying to get a new one going. Kathleen Kennedy, who's a part of, she works pretty closely with Steven Spielberg. I think she now is the president of Lucasfilm, and so like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all that. She had said that basically Kathleen Kennedy was.
She was involved with Back to the Future, I believe. Somehow.
Okay. Anyway,
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. I just wasn't aware of that. She had said that basically there was a lot of issues securing the rights for another film adaptation, and they were trying to do it in 2009 and then again in 2011, and they were just having a lot of problems. And she said eventually maybe it's just not meant to be. So it sounds like it's not really. Nothing's happening with it, really.
Well, if she's given up, then it won't happen. But if anybody at Disney feels like they need to get it, I'm sure they can.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be too hard for Disney to buy whatever they want at this point.
Yeah.
I always thought it was a little weird at the end of this movie so they say that when Bastion and the Empress meet and she's holding that grain of sand and she says it's all that remains of Fantasia. And yet here the actual Empress stands holding the grain of sand. Like, to me, that seems like the fact that the Empress is still existent. There's way more left than a grain of sand. There's a person from Fantasia. There's a native from Fantasia standing there holding.
Well, I think she was talking about the actual land itself.
Oh, well, I guess.
But you could also argue that the fact that when they were flying through space, there was big chunks of it.
Yeah, that's another. Around. I don't know. I guess I just take things way too literally.
We mentioned Superman earlier. I think that when it exploded, something about the way it was floating around out there reminded me of the Superman movie.
Yeah, I could see that.
Because didn't they show that at the beginning of Superman, like when Krypton exploded, they just had chunks of it floating around?
No,
actually, no.
Well, maybe I'm thinking of something else.
They just show, the explosion, and then that's it.
I remember.
Which, by the way, I think they used to do explosions like that on the 70s and 80s films. They used to have, a big hangar or something, like a big airplane hangar that's empty. It was
all the same explosion.
They'd turn out all the lights, and they'd hang, explosives from the top of the hangar, and then they put the camera directly beneath the explosives so that when it exploded, it would just look like it's just going in all directions, but it's really just exploding from the ceiling down towards the camera. That's a little bit of a special effect 101 history lesson there, I guess.
I thought they should just shut the exhaust port.
So the last thing I wanted to say is, where did the book come from?
That is a good question.
My first guess would be hell. I have no idea.
How did this one book have this? What is happening? Is Fantasia a world, or is just the book itself? Is it a gateway
I would say
to that
the
world?
Book itself is magic. It's supposed to be like we were talking about earlier. It takes a little bit of all the fantasies from everywhere and kind of combines them. I figured that's kind of what Fantasia probably was. It was Wonderland. It was Fantasia. It was all these places, Neverland, that we've heard about, and they were all combined into that one. Just due to copyrights and all that stuff, you can't copy all that stuff and have it exactly the same. But that's kind of what I felt like it probably was supposed to be. It's just every fantasy world ever rolled up into one, and they all live there, kind of like the cartoon world in Roger Rabbit.
Okay,
that
and Warner Brothers.
That makes sense to me now as an adult, but as a kid, I would have never put that together. I would have been like, no, this is not Neverland. This is something else.
Right. Yeah, that's so I'm thinking, watching back now, just putting together little pieces of the movie and the story, I'm thinking that that's probably what it was meant to represent, is just
Right.
your limitless imaginations and all the stuff that has been created from it so far.
It's funny how, as I'm older watching it, I see more symbolism and more connections to other mythos. But as a kid, I just took things so literally and like isolated, and yeah.
I think that's what's cool about a movie like this, where you can watch a movie from 1984 now and find so many different angles and layers to it that you never noticed, or where, I can see something and then Brandy can see something totally different and Dave something else. There's all these different dimensions to it. That's kind of cool. Whether they intended it to be that way or whether that's just the way we read into it, I don't know, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
The possibilities will never end.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Yeah, we finally got like an official fantasy movie out of the way for
Yeah. This is the one I wanted to do. Like, this is the one that was on my list to do for like as a fantasy movie. I wanted to kick it off with it.
We've kind of done some fantasy stuff. I mean, I guess the superhero stuff is considered fantasy.
See, I always considered superhero stuff a little more like sci-fi.
Yeah, especially Superman.
It's whether it's an experiment to give someone powers or he wears some kind of tech to give him powers. Like, I always thought it was a little more sci-fi myself.
Well, Superman is straight up sci-fi. It's just an alien.
Well, if you look it up, like let's say you go to like Wikipedia and you look up the genre, it has fantasy listed as that. And I can kind of see what they're talking about, like people with special abilities.
Yeah.
Like a lot of fantasy movies will have those, or special items that grant special abilities.
Yeah.
But,
well,
like,
I know some people even say Star Wars is a sci-fi fantasy movie,
Yeah, it's fantasy adventure.
Yeah.
Space opera.
But yeah, this is to me the truest definition of a fantasy film.
Yeah, and we'll have to add more to it as we go along.
Yeah.
You know what would probably really escape that kind of categorization would be the X-Men, is because even though it's technically comic book, I mean, you can't call it something other than comic book. If you try to call it fantasy or sci-fi, it's so many things wrapped into one. It's not even funny.
Yes.
I never thought that deeply on X-Men as being multi-layered, but that's fine.
It's very multi-layered.
Are we ready to grade, or is there any more points to be spoken of?
I'm ready for grade. I don't want to go first, though.
Okay. Dave?
Well, I guess I would give this movie, I would say a B minus, maybe a C plus. I'll say a C plus. It's all right.
C plus. All right.
Yeah.
What made you go from a B minus to a C plus?
Well, that was, I guess,
like, what last minute in your head made you say no, C plus?
Well, because I was thinking about all the different, variables that I weigh when grading, and my first instinct was to grade it from the perspective of my inner child or my memories of watching this as a kid.
Where would you say it fails to bring it down to a C plus?
I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a result of any type of failure, but it's just because the movie, I think, succeeds in doing what it sets out to do.
Where would you say?
Right, but I'm saying you originally said a B minus, so something had to at the last minute say no, that's too good for it or too high. Let's take it down a little. What did that for you?
Well, okay, I was gonna say initially I said B minus because initially I was grading this solely from the
kid point of view.
Child.
Okay.
Yeah, but then I started to think about it more as an adult, and I started to weigh both my assessment of it as a kid and my assessment of it as an adult, and I started to balance those, and I think I just land in a nice, comfortable C plus range for me.
All right, that's fine. Okay, so C plus from Dave.
I'll give it I'd say probably a B plus.
Okay, that's exactly what I was going to say. A B plus.
Yeah, the story is good. The writing of it is probably more advanced than what I thought it was as a kid, looking back on it. The acting, like you're saying, is kind of choppy in some places, and sometimes the logic doesn't make a whole lot of sense, like Atreyu in the Swamp of Sadness. But yeah, like everybody I've talked to about this movie, even when I said that I was going back and rewatching it, everybody our age is like, oh, I love that movie. I loved that movie when I was a kid. So there's something special about it.
Yeah, I think, the story is really good. Like you said, there's a few things you can nitpick at, and, like I said, Bastian's acting, or maybe some of the effects don't hold up quite as well. But to me, most of the effects hold up extremely well. Maybe not some of the lip movements, but, some of the other things. And I just feel like that it deserves a B plus. I think we've talked before about what movies deserve or don't deserve a remake, and I would like to see this remade if they could do it justice, which they probably really couldn't. But this would be a movie I would love to see done right.
Yeah, if they did it right, I agree. I'd like to see like this one either get an updated sequel or a remake.
I was gonna say, given the option between a sequel and a reboot, I kind of think a sequel would be cool because you could totally have this book still lying around somewhere, and then some new kid picks it up and
that's kind of like Tron 2 did, basically, where they tried to just
it's both like a sequel and a reboot in a way.
Yeah,
right. Kind of like how they did Superman Returns. It was kind of like a sequel and a reboot at the same time.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
All right, so coming up on the Escape podcast, stay tuned for Escape from New York. As a request by Amir, I believe.
Yep.
We're also looking at doing Star Trek 3 soon.
Ding.
Yes.
And was there anything else that we had scheduled?
No, you and I were tossing around some ideas just the other day, about Alien from LA, or what was that one movie with Arena I was talking to you about the other day. How serious this is, I don't know just yet, but we were just talking about some things. Obviously, we just spoke on doing maybe Dark Crystal, but nothing solid, just kind of ideas floating around. I don't really know.
For sure that we'll be doing soon will be Star Trek 3 and Escape from New York.
Correct.
Yes.
And if there's anything that you'd like to hear us talk about, we'll watch just about anything from Spice World to
Babysitter's Club.
Yeah, sure. So I don't know why we picked the two girliest movies, but if you want to, we'll give it a shot.
Yeah.
Girl power.
So yeah, if you'd like to get a hold of us, you can find us on iTunes by searching the Escape Podcast, and also on Facebook by searching the Escape Podcast.
And don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, which is growing. We're putting more content on there. We have some special videos that you can't hear on our podcast. Go check it out.
Because they're actually videos. Yeah, we're really trying to get YouTube to be our main hub. So if anyone would be willing to subscribe and rate and review us on YouTube and iTunes as well, we would greatly appreciate that. The more subscribers we get, if we can get 100, we can actually get a customized URL instead of just a jumble of letters and numbers. So that would be great.
Yeah, and we're not trying to like beg for subscriptions or anything, but all we're saying is please.
Yeah. I was kind of pleasantly surprised. I searched like a few weeks ago, I searched the Escape Podcast on YouTube, and we were like way down there. And what's funny is I actually put the Escape Podcast and all these other things that didn't have any of those three words in it were coming up way ahead of us. I mean, there was probably like 40 things between us, and I didn't even understand that. And then like yesterday or today, I looked at it, and we're actually now the top one. When you search the Escape Podcast on YouTube, we are the first channel that comes up. And if you actually search us on Google, we are the second and third. Our Facebook page is the second, and our iTunes page is the third. So that's pretty
something
cool.
Right now. As soon as we can figure out what that is, we'll do more of it.
Yeah. So yeah, please rate and review us on iTunes, and subscribe and rate us and review us on YouTube. That would be great.
Yeah, don't be afraid to let us know how good we are or how bad we are.
Also, check out the Facebook page, Escape Podcast 16.
Yes. And you can write us on Escape Podcast 16 at Gmail, of course, as well, if you want to do it that way.
And eventually we may get a Twitter, I guess. I'm not sure yet.
Yeah.
We're still trying to work Facebook, so we're old.
Yeah, Podomatic is also another way. If you're not up on iTunes, you can listen to us on Podomatic as well.
Yes, that is correct.
And all these links are in our descriptions, and whichever page you go to, there's a link that takes you to all the other pages. It's covered, so we're not hard to find.
Like they would say on Futurama, that equals true.
Yes.
I'll be whatever I want to do. All right, that's about it then. Thanks for listening, and catch us next time.
Yep. Didn't work out. I was gonna have it. It was him screaming "Moonchild." That did not work out.
It was a nice thought.
I didn't even recognize what I was hearing. It was so awful. Like
you're awful.
It was so garbled.